Hi, and welcome to People's Through the HR Lens, our 10-part 2025 market update series, taking a comprehensive look at some of the leading HR trends that are impacting the workforce and employee landscape across Australia. I'm Leanne Lazarus, Recruitment Manager here in the People2people Brisbane team, and I specialise in the HR vertical. On today's episode, we will be talking about how you can protect yourself from a workplace harassment claim. This week, we are joined by Jonathan Mamril, Director and Head of Employment Law at South Geldard Lawyers, to dive into the critical issue of workplace harassment, breaking down key facts about sexual harassment at work, how to recognize when boundaries are crossed, what steps to take to protect yourself and the organization, and how to respond effectively when faced with inappropriate behavior in a professional setting. According to a Safe Work Audit report, 1 in 3, which is 33%, said that they have experienced sexual harassment at work in the past 5 years. Of these, almost 2 in 5 women, 39%, and just over 1 in 4 men, 26%, have reported experiencing sexual harassment in the workplace. In addition to this, 1 in 2 people have been exposed to sexual harassment, either as a victim themselves or as a bystander. With such confronting statistics, it raises the question, do you know how to respond when someone crosses a line at work? To discuss this further, we are joined today by Director and Head of Employment Law at South Geldard Lawyers, Jonathan Mamril. Welcome.
Hi, how you going?
Thanks for joining us today, Jonathan. And I have a few questions just to ask you to see what, from your perspective, what HR and organizations need to do when it comes to sexual harassment. So the first question I have for you is, what should companies do to mitigate risks in relation to sexual harassment claims?
Great question, Leanne. I suppose there's a couple of things you could do. So one of the easiest things to put in place is a sexual harassment policy. Okay, if you can do a standalone one, great. If not, just a policy to put in place, which just basically sets out the reasonable standards and expectations. This might be a little bit different for different industries, different locations, if you've got a remote workforce. Okay, so there might be a few changes that you might need to make, but some sort of standardized sexual harassment policy and then some training around that as well. Also, what you will need to do is have an understanding, the management team need to have an understanding of what needs to happen if there's an actual claim or there's actual complaint or it's been actually witnessed, there's been sexual harassment being witnessed. So what are the steps? So they make that very, very clear for management and leadership teams to undertake. And then probably the last thing is in Queensland in particular, there's now a requirement to have a sexual harassment plan in place. So that's not overly difficult to implement, but these are just some of the steps you could put in place to put some protections and just mitigate that risk and liability.
Absolutely. Now, from there, how should companies, HR, and organizations respond when a claim is made? What is critical for them?
Yeah, it's very critical to really have a good process to deal with a sexual harassment complaint. And the best way, obviously, is to have maybe a policy that sets it out very clearly. Okay, so whether it's going to be a complaint procedure or it's going to be in the sexual harassment policy itself, what is the actual steps that are going to be taken? So usually it's going to be something along the lines of a complaint to a superior or maybe the HR team, and there's going to be an investigation, preferably an external investigation, so someone not internally is undertaking the investigation to ensure that there's no bias and it's very independent, and then there'll be allegations that are put to the perpetrator or the alleged perpetrator. So there's got to be some steps in place, so it's very clear to everybody. Where we get into a bit of trouble, Leanne, is when it's not clear. That's when problems really arise.
So when we talk about, how to respond to the claim, what are the key risks involved in managing a harassment claim? It's a sensitive issue. What do we need to focus on from that risk perspective?
I suppose one of the first risks, which I think is a bit overlooked, is not doing anything, okay, or doing very little. And this can be a bit tempting when it comes to difficult sexual harassment complaints, and especially if there's a power imbalance, Leanne. If there's a power imbalance, you have maybe, say, someone that's of a manager level, and then you have maybe someone at a junior level, and the person in the junior level make that complaint. That can be very difficult traverse. I think the other risk as well is when it comes to, say, there's an involvement of, say, performance management or some other disciplinary action, and then sexual harassment has now come out of that. Okay, so that being mixed and fused together and confusing and convoluting those issues. And I suppose, to be clear on that point, we need to make sure it's separate. Okay, that they're very separate. So if there's disciplinary action, it's separate. If there's a workers' comp claim, it's separate. If there's a sexual harassment complaint, that's separate. So keeping those things relatively separate is another. But I suppose the risk that you really have, if you don't deal with it properly, if you don't have a policy in place, obviously the big ones are going to be general protections, unfair dismissal, and then there's also sexual harassment. There's actually a complaint that can be made to the commission itself. So the Fair Work Commission, it's not like a workplace bullying, stop workplace bullying order. Stop sexual harassment orders actually have a bit of teeth. So they can actually set down financial compensation. They can actually set down other types of non-financial penalties as well. So there are serious risks. And that's excluding, of course, your national discrimination legislation, workplace health and safety, psychosocial risks and hazards. There is actually a myriad of different types of risks, Leanne.
Perfect. Now, obviously, with managing this claim process, it's critical that it's done correctly. And you've mentioned that some of the potential outcomes that could come from not managing it correctly. What are the penalties and the consequences, and who or what level does that sit with?
Yeah. So it depends on the jurisdiction, but in some of the jurisdictions, let's say workplace health and safety, let's say general protections, and discrimination legislation, they do attract penalties. Okay, so not just penalties for the company, but penalties for individuals involved. All right, so that is quite obviously a difficult area to traverse. It's quite high in liability. Then you've got the more reactionary types of issues as well. So you might just have a straight out complaint. You might have a link to an unfair dismissal claim. So that obviously has compensation. There could be reinstatement. You could even be like the Sex Discrimination Commissioner also has new powers, where they've been emboldened with new powers where they can actually go into a workplace and force issues such as forcing a workplace to have a policy, forcing them to undertake training and proving and evidencing that. So, that is some of the things that can actually happen from a sexual harassment complaint that's either not dealt with at all, not dealt with properly, or if, reasonably, if someone says to a discrimination commissioner and says, look, I don't think my complaint has been dealt with appropriately, or not, at least not in time, so maybe the investigation's taken much longer than it probably should, they can actually move those cogs a little bit and force some action. So you just got to keep those things in mind. There are third parties that are outside of just the employer-employee relationship that can be involved. And probably the other one I wanted to bring to your attention and bring to the people who are watching this as well, Leanne, is the idea of you have a victim and a potential perpetrator as well. So these allegations are quite serious. And so what's the effects on those people or groups of people as well? So it's not just the victim, but also the potential perpetrator, because those types of issues also need to be dealt with. And then, of course, there's the effect on the workplace. So the productivity side, filling in some hole. If you've got a smaller business or a smaller apartment, how do you fill those positions? That can be quite tricky. That can be quite difficult, especially if it's funded by a government body or it's a not-for-profit. So these are all the issues that are swirling around, not just the legal, but you've got the commercial and, of course, the workplace change issues as well.
Perfect. Now, just a separate question is, when it comes to actually lodging a sexual harassment claim, is it purely the victim, or could it be a bystander that's experienced it that could actually lodge it?
Yeah, well, of course, a bystander can lodge this, of course, but usually you're going to have the person who's the victim. Okay, so that's usually where the complaint's going to come from, and if you look at all the cases, that's where most of it comes from. Where potentially it's drawn to the attention of management or leadership or HR, potentially it is another party. Yeah, and that's where potentially you might have that person becoming a witness. to the events or was told about these events. Okay, and so you might have issues around hearsay, you might have issues around whether a reliable witness, but potentially it could be instigated in that way. And that's why a workplace investigation, to actually delve into the allegations and the facts, it's critical and it's very important.
Perfect. Well, Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us today. How can someone get in touch with South Geldard Lawyers and yourself for more information in regards to sexual harassment?
There's many ways. So phone number is 0749369100. You can also catch me on email, jmamril@southgeldard.com.au, and you can check us on our website, South Geldard Lawyers. Also catch me on LinkedIn. So I do a lot of content on LinkedIn as well. Just look up my name, connect with me. I'm happy to connect with you as well.
Marvelous. Thank you for that.
Speak soon.
This week's Through the HR Lens has been presented along with the People2people 2025 Markets Report Survey. Every year, People2people release their annual employment and salary trends report, built off the results of the Australia's workforce and hiring landscape revealed in the survey. Have your say on the future of work and help us identify salary trends, talent attraction and retention strategies in your industry. Visit www.people2people.com.au or click the link in the comments for more information. Lastly, if you're looking to grow your HR career or expand and build your HR team, I'm here to help you. With extensive experience working within the HR space, I can help connect you with the right opportunities and your team with the right talent. Get in touch with myself or the team. My contact details on the screen below, or follow the links in the comment section. That is it for today's edition of Through the HR Lens Market Update. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.